Now I've got a bit of a confession to make. Despite all the years that I've been quilting, I have never made a block of the month quilt. Well, that's all about to change with this. Now this box is from Cottoncuts and it contains all the pieces that I need to make what's called a puzzle mystery quilt. And although it's similar to a block of the month, it's a bit of a mystery as to what you might make. Now some months you might form a block shape and some months you might not. And sometimes you might only make one block or you might make several. And because you don't know what the quilt is going to look like until you get to clue 10, it's all a bit of a mystery as to what your finished quilt is going to look like. So in the box we received all of the fabric for the quilt top and everything is pre-cut, which is awesome because you don't have to fuss around cutting out all the pieces. However, you don't need to buy the whole box in one go. You can instead choose to receive your fabric on a monthly basis if you prefer. And you can choose from 2 quilt sizes. Now the way this works is that you receive the clues to piecing your blocks on a monthly basis. You'll either receive them in the pack that is mailed to you or you'll receive them via email. And then each month you construct the blocks according to the instructions. Now each clue comes in its own packet and all the pieces are pre-cut, so all you need to do is sew the pieces together with a 1/4 inch seam. Now we belong to Team Dusty Rose, as that is the colourway that we chose for our pack. There are a number of colour choices available and it was really hard to choose which one to go with. Now if you want to take part in this, I'll put a link in the description field below, but you will need to be quick as you'll only be able to order up until the end of September. So if we take a look at clue number 1, here we can see that it comes with all the pieces you need plus a nice little gift. Now the fabric in your pack is shown on the back of the pamphlet and the colours are labelled A through to F. So I'm going to lay these all out and match them to the letters on the back of the pamphlet. Now I printed out some letters on my new Bamboo Lab 3D printer to put on each colour so I know exactly which is which. Now there are 2 different block types in the pack and we're going to be making 2 of each, so we will end up with 4 blocks in total for clue 1. There are step-by-step written instructions and diagrams, which is great if you are a visual quilter like me. The instructions also show you how to press the seams as you go. This is important to do as it will help when piecing the block and when piecing the final quilt together. So let's start putting clue 1 together. The first thing we're going to do is to sew a small triangle A to small triangle D, and we're going to make 4 of these and everything will be sewn with a 1/4 inch seam. So I've sewn them together and now I'm going to check the instructions to see which way I need to press the seams. Now this is important because it will help you to sew the pieces nicely together so that everything nests nicely. So I've finished sewing and pressing each of these blocks and now I'm going to set 2 of them aside and go on to the next step. And you can see here that we need to add a square of fabric D to each block. Now just make sure you have each piece the right way round as per the diagram, so you'll have the cream on top and the green at the bottom. So I'll do that and sew down each edge with a 1/4 inch seam. And again, I'll press the seam according to the instructions. I won't be showing you any more pressing in this video, so just remember to follow the instructions for each piece as you go. Now we're up to step 1.3, and we're going to be sewing 2 of the fabric D rectangles to these pieces, like so. Now once they're sewn on, you just need to sew on the 2 large squares to each piece. So just place each square over the top of each piece and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So step 1 is complete and we can put these 2 pieces aside for now as we move on to step 2. Now for this step I'm going to bring in the other 2 blocks that we previously created, and from the instructions you can see that we need to add a square of fabric D to each piece. So I'll take those 2 pieces and sew them on like so. And once they're sewn together I will move to the next step, which is to sew on the fabric D rectangle pieces to each side. Now that those pieces are complete, I can set them aside and move on to step 3. And for this step, we're creating some triangles, so we need a square of fabric and 2 triangles from D and F. And I'm going to take the cream coloured triangles and place them over each of the squares and sew them and press those first. Then I'll come back and sew the remaining triangle onto each piece. And once those pieces are sewn together, we can sew on the large fabric C triangles to each piece. So I'll do that and sew down each edge with a 1/4 inch seam. Now we're ready for step 4. And what we need to do here is sew on the piece that we created in step 2 to the top of each of the pieces and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'll take those 2 pieces and sew them on like so. And now for the final step. And here we just need to sew the pieces we created in step 1 to these pieces. So just line them up like so and sew along the edge with a 1/4 inch seam. So that's our first blocks complete, and now we're ready to move on to section 1B. And at this stage you should have used up all of the A and C fabrics and only have B, D, E and F remaining. So I'm going to start by taking 2 each of the small fabrics from B and E and sew the pieces together to form little half square triangles. Then I'm going to repeat the process with fabrics B and F. So I'll do that and sew down each edge with a 1/4 inch seam. And when they're done, I'm going to check the instructions, and I need to now sew the other 2 blocks to the top of each of these. And now that they are sewn, I'll just put them aside and go on to step 2. And in this step we need to use 1 B triangle and 2 E triangles, and we're going to be making 2, and I have them here. So I'm going to sew one piece on here, sew it down and press it open, and then when we come back I'll sew the other piece onto the other side, and I'll repeat that with the other one. So I've finished the 2 pieces, and now we're going to the next step, and that is to bring in the pieces that we sewed in step 2 and join them together. So I'm just going to turn them round, and we put that piece there and the other one here. And then we're going to sew those pieces onto each side. We now have those 2 pieces finished, and I'm just going to put them aside and we'll move on to step 5. And here we're going to be sewing B, D and F. And I have them laid out here, and we'll be sewing these in exactly the same way as in the previous step. And once they're sewn, you can see in the instructions that we need to repeat that process with 2 pieces of fabric B and 1 of E. So as I said before, I will sew on one of the small triangles, then give it a press, and then I'll sew the remaining piece on. So I've sewn them together, and then what we're going to do is to join those to the last lot that we sewed. So I'll bring down the first 2 blocks that we made and place one over the other and sew along with a 1/4 inch seam. So they'll look like this. So now we have those 2 pieces sewn, and I'm going to put them aside and move on to step 7. And the instructions tell us that we need to sew a square of D fabric to a square of F fabric and sew them together like so. Now that we have those 2 pieces sewn together, and we're just going to add another piece of D fabric to the sides of each. So I'll add one to that side and one to the other side, and then place right sides together and sew them together. Okay, so we have those 2 pieces down, and now we're going to sew it all together by following this key here. I'll place that piece on top of there and sew it, and then place that one on top of there and sew it together, and I'll do the same with this one. Okay, so that's that section done, and now I'll just bring in the other 2 that we've made, and that's our 4 blocks completed for clue 1. Now I'm going to put these into a bag, and I might fold them up and put them into the original bag, or I might find a larger bag. Now if you want to see clue 2, we'll be putting that up on our Facebook page, and I'll put a link in the description field below for that.